All right. So if you could just tell us what happened today. We read the accounts on the news agencies of a car bomb that exploded in a market. Could you tell us what happened, to the best of your knowledge, when your troops went to the scene, what happened in Tikrit today?
Yes, and actually I'm the operations officer for the division. We have the battalion commander standing by who actually owns the ground here in Tikrit and was on the scene. But I could tell you from the division perspective that a suicide bomber drove his vehicle into a crowd of workers that were getting prepared to go to work in the morning, basically migrant farm workers from what we could tell in a residential area, and approximately 27 were killed and 70 injured.
And I guess you weren't on the scene, but could you tell us a little bit about what kind of area this is, what it looked like from the reports you were hearing, what time of day? If you could just paint a picture of events with words. Was it chaos? Were there lots of bodies on the streets? Was it slow reaction from the Iraqi police? Did ambulances arrive? I'm just trying to get a feel. Obviously, we weren't there. Your people were there. If you could just let us know what it was like.
Yes. It was 6:30 in the morning, and as I mentioned, these individuals were assembling to go to work in the morning. Obviously, the area that the attack occurred in is a residential / business area. There was a restaurant located nearby. The car bomb, suicide car bomb, was a substantial size bomb and caused a large explosion. Damaged most of the buildings in the area, blowing out glass, etc. The reaction of the Iraqi emergency services were very quick. We've had a series of these type of attacks in the last 30 days here in Tikrit, and police, fire, ambulance, and U.S. forces were on the scene within minutes to assist.
If I can ask you to be just a step back from the day-to-day detail that we see so often, and try and explain to me and to people at home. Every day we see 20, 30, 40, today maybe 60 people killed in these bombings, and people don't understand why. Why are they doing this? Why are they killing innocent people in a residential area in Tikrit?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of different reasons that we've seen here with this upsurge in these type of attacks in the last month. Two types of individuals we see conducting these attacks. Mostly, we suspect are foreign fighters, not non-Iraqis, that are doing these attacks for radical fundamentalist reasons. And what we think their goal really is to delegitimize the government. In an attack today, like today, where we see just a blatant attack on vulnerable civilians, the only explanation is that they're trying to delegitimize the government and make the Iraqi people feel unsafe. Recent other attacks we've seen are targeting directly at the Iraqi security services, both the police and the army. And we see that based on the fact that the growing capability of the Iraqi police and army are really the biggest threat to the insurgency. And that, as that proficiency and competence of those Iraqi forces increase, we're seeing a correspondence increase on targeting of those forces. But attacks that just slaughter civilians like we saw today here in Tikrit and also up in Baji today, which is also part of our AO, is, we think, basically an attempt to delegitimize the emerging government.
No, that's an excellent answer, and I appreciate that, and hopefully it'll help put things into context for people. And so you think, getting back, you just alluded to it, but you think it's foreigners? You think it's mostly non-Iraqis who are doing this? Because we hear so many different conflicting reports. And what evidence do you have that these are foreigners? I mean, what's left of a suicide bomber to tell you that this is this is a foreigner or not?
In some cases, we've actually intercepted these type of bombs, particularly here in the last 30 days, where it seems to be an increase in these type of attacks. And we've captured some of them before they were able to execute their attack, and they did, in fact, turn out to be foreigners. In other cases, we have evidence where some of these drivers are actually tied or somehow handcuffed to the steering wheel and are driving these vehicles under coercion, threat of physical harm, threat against their family, and they are directed to drive the vehicle in the vicinity of a target, and then it is remotely detonated from a third party.
I had a quick question. Would those people who become, I don't know how you'd even describe them, they're coerced suicide bombers, are these Iraqis?
Yes, in one case we've actually had an individual survive that type of event where he was thrown from the vehicle, and he told his story. But those type of attacks we think are the minority, but we have had some accounts of seeing these drivers where they are physically attached to the vehicle so they can't change their mind.
And why now? You say in the last 30 days things have skyrocketed, and just to recap some of your events, you said you think it's foreigners who want to destabilize the government or people who are being coerced. You think that they're trying to attack the Iraqi security forces because the Iraqi security forces are getting better. But why now? Why in the last 30 days have we seen attacks skyrocket? The military today said that attacks are back up to 70 a day instead of 30 or 40 a couple of months ago. Why now?
We think it corresponds directly to the outcomes of the successful elections. Now that we're seating the provincial and national governments, and that process has not been disrupted by force. It is moving along at a pace greater than we anticipated, and same could be said for the Iraqi security forces. Both the police and the army are making dramatic improvements in their competency, dedication, and proficiency. They're standing and fighting, and they've been very effective. So as the effectiveness of those security forces and the government increase, we think that is provoking a more desperate enemy.
And finally, and that'll give you an opportunity to tell me anything else that we've missed. So what are you doing about it? You've got all these troops up there. You've got Iraqi allies. Tell me what you're doing about it to stop this, because we see bloodshed getting worse every single day, and I know you're not the only man in uniform here in Iraq, but what are your troops doing to stop this?
Well, actually, out of the 20 or so attacks we've seen here in our AO in the last 30 days, only 10 of those have been effective. Of the other 10, they've either been intercepted before they detonated or were ineffective. And unfortunately, what we think, and I can't really go into the details of the countermeasures that we take, but we definitely think because our defenses are more proactive and more effective, we're seeing them go after what we consider the softer targets. You know, a gathering of 100 people getting ready to work to go to work like we saw today, as opposed to a military target, which is much more harder to have an effective attack against. So although we see the number of attacks spiking up, we don't necessarily see the effects of those attacks against Iraqi security forces or U.S. military, and we think that pushes them towards softer civilian targets.
And right now, is it fair to say that the military, this operation, I know that's out of your AO, the one in western Iraq, is this the start of another push? Is the military now back on the offensive? Would you say that I know you know to Crete, but you're in, being a colonel, you're in contact with other divisions and with other areas of the country. Would you say that the military is now in a aggressive posturing, that after some period, and I know obviously missions are always ongoing, but during the period of transition, I've been in Iraq for a couple of years now, so I've watched the peaks and valleys of the activity. Would you say we're in a period of intensified U.S. military activity now across Iraq?
I can't really comment knowledgeably about what's going on in the marine sector, but I can tell you that we've increased some of the pace of our operation, and that's really based on the increased cooperation and teamwork with the Iraqi security forces. And one of the things that they bring to us is very good intelligence, and that's really what drives the pace of operations. So if there is an increase in operations, and I think that's probably a fair assessment in RAO, I think it's based on improvements in the quality of intelligence, both from the Iraqi security forces, and what we've really seen is unprecedented number of Iraqi citizens coming forward with good intelligence on enemy activity. And that's been a steady rise since the election period.
And finally, sir, you get the last word. Is there anything that I haven't mentioned that I should know?
No, the only overall comment I would say, and I alluded to earlier, is that we think that what we're seeing here is really acts of desperation by an insurgency that's losing its popular support within Iraq. And as they become more desperate, we see more of these fanatical attacks that don't seem to make any sense on the surface.
That's also very well put. And if you could just have it so I don't embarrass you, could you tell me your name, your rank, or the best way to describe you, and your last name spelled out?
Yes, my name is Colonel Mario Costagliola. I'm the Operations Officer for the 42nd Infantry Division, Task Force Liberty, and my last name is spelled Costagliola.
All right, thank you very much. I know this is very awkward to talk to no one in the middle of space and just be staring out there, so thank you very much. I appreciate you did a great job.